Hi all, good morning or good evening, depending on where you're located. Thank you for joining our Power BI webinar, and my name is Deepak Shankar. I'm a community manager within the Microsoft Business Application Group, and we have Mike Carlo, an MVP with us, who will walk us through the new Power BI features and the best practices in visualization creation in Power BI Desktop. So, hi Mike, welcome to our webinar, and it's all yours now.
Hey gang, let's get into the presentation. Quick introduction on just kind of me and who I am and what I'm all about. This webinar will be about just using some best practices for building visuals in Power BI Desktop. We're just going to go through a couple tips, tricks, and techniques that I use when I'm building a bunch of my reports. And hopefully you can take away a couple observations here that will help you be more efficient, faster, and build better looking reports in the long run. A little bit about myself. My name is Mike Carlo. I'm a MVP from the data platform. I represent Power BI. I'm one of the creators of PowerBI.tips. That's the website that I run. So if you Google things about Power BI, you'll likely have stumbled across some of my tools or my blogs or articles around Power BI. My background is mechanical engineering. I also have an MBA and have taken a number of classes in data science as well. So I'm kind of a data guy through and through. I thoroughly love the data, but you would classify me as a typical business user. I was the guy who used tons of Excel, made lots of macros, and definitely was very much appreciated the business tools that were Excel. I eventually stumbled across Power BI Designer, which eventually turned into Power BI Desktop, and I've been really loving this tool ever since. So that's kind of where I started the website. I felt like if I was learning things, other people would want to learn them too, and it's just my knowledge dump. Everything that I think is valuable or learnable, I just put onto the website. If you'd like to follow me, you're more than welcome to. I'm at Power BI Tips on Twitter, or Michael R. Carlo on Twitter, or you can catch me on LinkedIn. All right, I'm not big on presentations, so I'm actually going to cut right out of this, and we're going to get right into demos and working with Power BI directly. So let me transition here. So when I'm building reports, there's a lot of things that can go on when you start building reports. So Simon Sinek is a really good author. He talks a lot about the millennial generations and just really being very critical about what he's thinking for how do you develop and build a good report. So one of the things that he talks about is really asking some different questions. And we all know when we move into building reports for individuals, the very first question is, I need this report. I need this table of information. I need these columns. I need this data and these calculations or measures, this sales dollars amount. And really what happens, especially in the Excel realm, is you would ask for a report from an IT organization. You'd get the report, and then you would take all of the items in that report, and then you would kind of move it over to Excel, and then you would kind of continually shape the data. Well, in reality, what is happening is they're asking us how to get the data, how to get the information. But in reality, we should really be asking a different question. We really want to start asking, why do you need the data? What are you looking to answer? So this is one of the biggest, I think, maybe misconceptions a lot when we start a project. A lot of people come with ideas to the table about what the report should look like and what the colors should be and all the kind of the finer things. Those things are definitely important, but we miss the high level question. We're not really drilling down to the very core portion here of why we're trying to do what we're doing. If I'm trying to show sales over time, what's the action behind that? What action should I be taking with seeing if sales are up or down? So a lot of times we try to boil these insights or the why questions to very simple answers. And I think Simon's quote puts it best when he says, we're trying to solve business problems, and when we are trying to solve business problems, we focus on the core reason someone wants to be visibly into the data. So really, we want to focus at why are you trying to get to the answer? What questions are you trying to derive? And how can we get that to our audience? So in addition to asking these why questions, we really try and think about what topics remain the best topics on the page, how many visuals to put on one page. We start talking about other styling techniques that we'd like to put on top of the page. So a lot of the things you'll see in this presentation are based off of items from the Gestalt principles. So these are kind of some core principles that I like to hold on to when I'm building reports. So the first one is keep it simple. I love pie charts. They're good in their use cases, but here's one good example of really a hard way of understanding the data. So on the left-hand side here, we have the pie chart, and the pie chart really has so many slices on here. It's very hard to compare how much larger one area is from another. However, by contrast, if we move away from the pie charts and we actually look more towards a bar chart, we can incrementally see how many states have different data points versus other states in this data set. So for example, I can see West Virginia is much higher than what we would see this data point for Michigan. And the reason being is the bars give me a much better reference. My eye is much easier to determine the size of the bar versus the slice of the pie. Another common kind of challenge you'll see with using pie charts in general, the very first thing you'll see is people will make a pie chart, they'll put a bunch of things on it, and then the first thing they'll ask for is, can you label it? So then you add data labels to it. The next thing they'll ask for is, can you add the numbers? Well, then I would argue if you have the pie chart and you have the labels and the numbers, you're basically just making a table at that point with just a pretty graph around it. So why not leverage something more like a bar chart to give us a bit more dimension to those number values? And in this case here, we've actually added the number values, the labels for each state inside this chart. Another trick I'd like to use, and it definitely is being consistent across your reports. So I'll give you a second here just to kind of look at this one initially. And looking at some of these numbers here, you'll probably see right away there's an issue with the top two charts versus the bottom two charts. And if I click on some things here, I think it'll start being a bit more apparent. So I'll click on South, then Northeast. Well, those colors don't quite match. Then we'll click on Midwest. Well, that's definitely wrong. And then we'll click on the West area, and then these colors don't match. Now, by contrast, if we go to the bottom chart, we can actually see that the South matches in color, Northeast region now matches in color, Midwest, and the Western region also matches. So one thing here that I find a lot of times when people are building reports is when you're building categorical items or dimensional items across your reports, you really want to try and tie multiple visuals together by color. So a couple of things that solves a problem for us is in the top two charts, we actually have a lot of extra data applied to this page. So in the top here, we have two different regions for the legend on the top left here for the left bar chart, and the legend here on the top right. So they're different, but it's kind of wasted information. If I already have the colors down here, like in the bottom two charts, I already know that the South category is labeled in this blue. Therefore, I can automatically infer that these different states belong to that category. So that's a really nice complement across those things. And now when we do this, we can actually save the extra landscape of not having the region attached to each of our charts. Another trick or technique that I like to use here that goes well with being consistent is you don't need the y-axis for everything. By default, a lot of the y-axis values are already shown on your charts. But if you see here on the left, I've reduced a lot of clutter. My eye has to interpret this bar here, the South bar, to make sure that it's at the right level to close to 400. So I can approximate what it is, but I don't know the exact value. Same with the Northwest here. I know it's between 200 and 300. It's kind of on the higher end, so maybe like around 280. All right, it's 282. So you do get you can guess kind of where the numbers are, but I have to think about what the guess is in order to get to the number. On the bottom chart here, I've removed the y-axis, so I'm not causing you to think about it. The relative scale of each bar is still held, but now we put the number on each of the bars to make it clearly indicating what the value is. And again, this is a really great technique that I like to use to, again, declutter the page. I try and put as little as I can on the page and remove everything that is duplicate values. All right, on to the next trick. And check my time. Oh, we're doing good. So on this trick, this is really about spacing, and this is really around the gestalt principle of proximity. We know that things that live together or kind of in the same area share the same bounding area or bounding boxes. So in the top here, again, I've over-exaggerated this slightly, but you'll notice right away that the items are not quite aligned. So it's really, really important that when you're building reports that you do a really good job trying to align the items. And I'll show you two tricks that I like to use when I'm doing alignment of items, actually probably three. So the first item is when you move these items around, if I grab this bar and drag it around here, you'll see if I zoom in, when I move the bar, you'll see there's these little red bar lines that show up. This is a feature you can turn on under File, Options and Settings, Options. And as soon as it wants to bring up the menu, Report Settings, and Display Smart Guides. This is the option right here. Display the smart guides when visuals are aligned. So this is an option that allows me to see those little red dotted lines. So this helps me at least get the edges of things correct. So if I grab this line over here, you can see that it's highlighting those red lines again. And then if I zoom in again so you can see what we're doing, there we go. We've zoomed in, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those little red lines. Okay, now that I've got one item adjusted, I can go to the other end of this chart and I can also align this other item. Now you'll notice here it's trying to drag these extra lines, and again they're very small, so I'll zoom in here again. These extra lines, and I can have already aligned here, but this one's aligning to the top of this middle card here, which I actually don't want. So I'll actually exaggerate him down a little bit, and then what I'll do is here on the left-hand side, I'll match up this south card. So now what this does is this now spaces my card on the right and the card on the left, and then I can place this middle card. It doesn't really matter where this one goes. Now what I can do is I can grab the three of them by holding the Control key. We can go up to the Format ribbon. We can click Align and align the top. So we're on the Align button and then aligning the top. By aligning top, all three visuals will be coming to the top of the edges, will be all aligned. And then the other thing I'd like to do is, now that I have the first card and the last card already pre-adjusted for the right distance away from the bottom visual, we now go back to Align and then we distribute horizontally. So here we're going to Align, Distribute horizontally, and then clicking that will then automatically space these things out equally across the page. And so now I've got a really great alignment. Another thing you'll notice here is, you can barely see it, but right in here, you can see that they're slightly off. And if I highlight that, if I try and draw a line here, you'll see that those two lines don't quite match up. So another thing we'd like to do is try to align all the sizes of the objects. So what I can do with this is I can actually hold Control. And a trick I like to use here is when three items are selected, you can go to the Visualizations window, click on the Format Paint Roller, and then you can go down to the General section. Then under the General section, you'll open that up. And now you can adjust the width and the height of all the visuals together as a group. So 165, that'll adjust all of the widths. And now I can make them 95. And now all of the heights are identical. Now if I go back over to my visuals, we'll zoom in way in here. Now we can see that the edge of this visual is now 100% lined up with the other one, and the sizes all now match. So again, another great technique there that we like to use as well. One other thing I'll note here, another trick that I like to use, when you're doing styling techniques, or you're trying to get one visual just dialed in, build one of them initially. So I have three different visuals here. I'd actually would start with just one. So technically I wouldn't need the other two items here. We would just get rid of them. And then I would do all my styling technique on the one visual at the top here. So this is where I would adjust my data label. Maybe when you want to change the text size here, so I'm going to go adjust the text size underneath the data label. And by shrinking that down a little bit, I can adjust that how I like it, the view of that data to be. Maybe I want to change the color of the category label. Great, we can do that as well. So I can click on this, and then we can adjust the color here to some other color. Let's go after this blue one. A little too light. Let's go with a darker blue. Too dark. Medium light. That sounds good. So now that I have one of these done, now it's easy for me to copy and paste this. So I'd even want to get the size or the dimensions of this correct. So then now I have it, I can Control C, click on the canvas, Control V, and then I can use my aligning tools to get the card realigned. And then I can paste as many of these as I want across the page. And then I can use my technique earlier to realign them and make sure that they're all distributed evenly across the page. One other trick that you can do here as well is if you have multiple items that are selected that are different objects, if you highlight two items, right click on them and group them together, this will make a grouped item. Grouped items are interesting because you can actually, even though the elements are different, you can adjust the entire group as a property under the general properties as well. So I could actually adjust this, and by adjusting the entire group, everything will resize together as one grouped element. So I really love groups. Groups are very amazing. So if you haven't used them, I highly recommend you use them. To group an element, you have to just select 2 items on the canvas. So holding Control, select 2 items, right click on them, and then when you right click, you can see the item called group. And when you group them, that will then bring the 2 items together, and then it will act like a common unit together. So these 2 now are bound together in this group. Okay, that's it for kind of like the tips and tricks. I'm going to go into some more things here to help you work faster and more efficiently in your reports as well. I think this is also a good point to just take a quick pause here and see if there are any quick questions. Deepak, have you had any questions so far that we can go through?
No questions, Mike.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll just keep on cruising.
So there is a quick question, like, is there a format option with alignment on a new feature?
So the alignment and grouping items are newer features. What you're looking at right here in this report, I'm using the new layout for Power BI Desktop. This is the new visual headers and everything else on the page. So what you'll see here is when you're looking at formatting, let me ungroup this here, group, ungroup. If I click multiple elements here, you'll notice that when I do this now, on the ribbon at the top here, you'll see, oops, excuse me, let me try that one more time. Zoom 1, there we go. You'll see that here we have a new ribbon at the top. The new ribbon is called Format. This is context aware. So it knows that if you have multiple elements selected, it won't display this ribbon until you get there. So now if I click on the ribbon format, now you can see that this is a whole new ribbon of just new properties that we can adjust and modify here. Again, these are more contextually aware, and only the ribbons that you need to use will show up when you need to use them. So that's something you do have to know about, is if you want to see that format ribbon show up, make sure you highlight multiple elements, and then the color will be different.
All right.
Question. Any other questions?
Yes. So one more question over here. Like, does Power BI have any accessibility checks?
That's another great question. So an accessibility check, and I'm going to define this how I understand it, just that way we're clear on what an accessibility check would be. An accessibility check is really looking at, I need to understand that the contrast of this card, right, the numbers of this card has enough contrast compared to the background here. So while Power BI does not technically have a accessibility check, I believe there are themes or files that you can, I guess technically they're called themes inside the file that would let you give you higher contrast. So if you need to, I think there's actually one in here called high contrast. So what I'm doing here to adjust this is I'm clicking on the page, I'm going to the view ribbon on the top, and then I'm clicking the down arrow, and then I'm clicking the first row, third item down called high contrast. And when I click on that, you can see that the theme of this report has changed and some of the colors are a bit bolder and brighter. So that's what we have as far as accessibility. But there is no active accessibility monitor inside the program as of today. Oh, there's actually a couple more questions. Looks like Jeff is asking, how do you add an item to an existing group? Great question. So I'm going to group 2 items here, right click, group these 2 items. These 2 items are now grouped. Let's say I want to bring in a third item because we just need one. So what I can do here is I can open up the selection window. So this is found on the view ribbon. So view ribbon, selection button. This is going to show the selection pane here on the right hand side. And what you'll see right away is now when I group these elements, I actually have a group called group 1. That's the group of these elements. So again, another best practice here that I like to use. I don't like just to name it group 1. I would really name it something that's important to me. So this may be like KPIs, or this can be Mike's cool thing, whatever it is, something that's unique so you know what it is on the page. So now that we have that, we can open this up by clicking on the little down arrow here in the upper hand corner, and I can go find my other card. Here it is. So now I can drag my card directly up. So I'm just grabbing the card itself and pulling it up here underneath Mike's cool thing. It automatically gets added to the group, and now all 3 items are grouped together. So that's how you add an item. If I wanted to do the reverse and remove an item from that group, I could right click and ungroup everything, or I can grab one of the items in the group. Now it's going to make me select something and remove that one item, that one card out, and then it will pop it out of that group. So that card is no longer attached to my group anymore. All right. I think these are good. There's a couple more good questions in here. Deepak, if you wouldn't mind monitoring those, I'll come back to some of these at the end. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time and want to make sure I get through all the good content that we have left. So yeah, I'm going to keep cruising through and we'll come back to some more stuff later. Great questions, guys. So moving over to themes. All right, so you've already seen themes a little bit. We did a little bit around high contrast. I do want to do a quick overview of what theming is and how you can use it. So up here in the left-hand corner, you'll see on the ribbons, I'm clicking on the view ribbon at the top here. And then from that view ribbon, I'm clicking the down arrow for themes. These are built-in themes that are already pre-applied with Power BI Desktop. So you can automatically change your color scheme here. If I click on Storm, this palette over here, this one called Storm, it's more like a blue, shades of blue kind of color. If I click on this, it's already predefined some text fonts, it's already defined some chart axes, and it's also defined the color range that we have here. What you'll notice here is these two charts actually have different colors based on their elements. So we can adjust the properties of the charts directly. If I go over here to the paint roller, I go into the property called data colors over here on the right. Clicking on data colors, these are the colors. So I can adjust things here and I can define default colors, or there's actually another little ellipsis here. We can actually start defining functions around what those colors should be. So conditional formatting on top of those colors for a bar. So some interesting things we can do here is you can automatically modify the colors yourself. Oh, another thing I'll note here is when I change the theme, you can automatically see that this theme color thing has already changed here as well. So changing a theme adjusts a lot of things on the page. So if I click on a different color here, you can see I've changed that bar. And then I can change it again to a different color, a darker color if I wanted to. So I can highlight them here and actually manually adjust them. I almost never manually adjust things unless I know for a fact I will not adjust that color or bar or thing again. If anything, what I'm doing, there's two items you can select. You can select an item off of the color palette up here, or you can enter your own custom color. If I enter my own custom color here, when I adjust the theme again, because I've defined the custom color, it will not change that color on the report. So if I keep changing this, you'll see that that peach color looking thing is not changing. So as I'm changing everything else, the entire rest of the report is changing except this bar. So this bar is not changing. So what I'd like to do is revert this to the default theme. So if I click the very bottom button here in the data colors section, it's called revert to default down here at the very bottom corner. Clicking on this takes all the colors back to what they were originally when we built the report. So if I now adjust my colors again and pick on different things, I can then adjust my colors right from the themes. Looks like I lost my legend on this one. Let me go put him back. Yeah, I did use my legend. Let me put him back here. So we want the region to be the legend. Let's do that. Okay. All right. So other things you can do with themes. So there's a lot more than just picking ones that are already here. You can actually go into customizing this theme. So if you customize this theme, what you'll get is a brand new window here. And this is new. This is within the last couple months, I think this was released. And this is really like classes or styles of classes across the entire report. So these are our 8 colors that we had before. This is the sentiment colors. So in certain visuals, like the waterfall chart, you can say a negative value, a positive value, and a neutral value. So certain visuals actually use these sentiment colors. You can define them here. You can actually adjust the color here directly inside the tool. You have some advanced features. These are things called classes or color classes or almost like CSS if you're building like website design. It's basically like a property that can modify many different properties. So as you adjust these, you can click on the different classes of items here, and you can actually change all these items at the global level. This means this applies to all visuals anywhere in the report. There's a lot of great documentation if you click this Learn More button to tell you how to do that and more information about that as well. Same thing for text fields. This one's grayed out for me. One thing that's also being tracked, and this is a kind of a known item here, if you have a file that was made before September 2019, like I have here, so my file was made a while ago, because this file is older, you cannot adjust the title or the cards or any of this text information. What you have to do is you have to build a brand new Power BI file, start from scratch, and then you'll be able to adjust these other elements here. These are not updatable post whenever you built the file. Next, you can move on to visuals. There's all, again, general properties of visuals, things for the page. So if you want a page background or change the transparency or color of that, you can do that as well. And then for the filter panel. So that's the window here that pops out on the right-hand side, this filter panel here. This is what they're describing when they talk about that. This is the filter panel. So you can adjust properties here. Once you've adjusted properties, or like your theme, you can actually export the theme. So you could export it and move it from this report to other reports if you wanted. Okay, so this is theming, but the stuff that you have right there is kind of at the cursory level. It's kind of like your initial run at the visuals. You can actually customize a lot more. There's this feature called Browse for Themes or the Theme Gallery. You can also make your own themes. And here, I'd like to bring up one of the tools that I offer from Power BI.tips. See if I can grab my theme builder. And for you guys today, and today only, this is our brand new version of theme generator from Power BI.tips. So here is a wonderful palette thing here that we can build. I'm going to zoom in here a bit so you can see it. So what this does is this lets you build your own custom palette however you want. So you can go out here and grab an individual color. You can add it. You can adjust the color and add some additional colors here by clicking the add button. And what this builds for you is a nice clean palette here in the middle of the page where you can reorient the colors dynamically. If you want to adjust the color or tweak it, you can click on it directly, and then you'll have the adjusted color, and then you can kind of continue tweaking it and add it back to your diagram here, and then you can remove stuff if you want. The best part of this tool, and I think it's kind of underrated here, is it has this thing called multiple input. So the idea here is you have color palettes. Maybe you have a company spec or something like that that has a bunch of colors in it, and you want to add everything all at once. So I just happen to have my favorite web browser with Bing up here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go search the internet for something. Let's just go after surfing. So I like surfing. And I'm just going to go after images. And there we go. We got some great images of surfers. So I'm going to just pick one of them. And I use this tool called Palette Creator. If I right click on it, I can get a palette from this thing. So I hit 8-bit palette. It grabs the image. It then gives me all the colors of this. I can click copy. It copies it to my clipboard. I go back over here to the tool, hit Control V for paste, and boom, there's all my colors right from that picture. Now I can click add, and they've automatically been added to my theme file. So now I can rearrange colors more if I want and adjust things here additionally. Too many darks, let's get rid of some of those. This is a little bit too much blue. And maybe this is what we want to settle on. We settle on something here. We can also adjust properties here. So you could click download now and get a copy of the theme with just the colors by clicking download here, or you can add additional properties. So over here at the properties section, you can click each of the visuals that have been made as an icon. You can click the visual, and now you can start adding properties here. Now, this is kind of an early release. We haven't got all the properties populated. Don't worry, they're coming. But we're going to have all the properties for all the visuals. We've got logged over 14,000 different properties that you can use on different visuals and between the visuals. So don't worry, it'll get populated more in the future here, but no, the tooling is available and you can start using it now. What you can do here initially is if you wanted to change the y-axis label, you could click the color here, and automatically all the colors that we had previously were automatically presented here as well, and you can just click on them. So you can click the color you want and the shade that you want directly in here, and this will then change the label color of this chart type directly for you. Once you're done selecting the items here, maybe we want to adjust a couple more things here. Maybe the category width is always up. Maybe we'd like to change the title color of the chart to something darker here. Let's go after this one, and then I can download this theme. I'm going to enter a name in here, demo theme, and then just click download. This will then download a file to my local machine. So I will then close out of these things. We don't need these anymore. And then open up this theme file from my desktop. And I'll bring up Visual Studio Code here. And this is our theme. So let me format this here so we can all see it better. Control. There we go. And right away, you'll see that here's our new theme. Let me just make it a bit bigger. Here's our theme color. You have now the color palette that we picked. And now you have all these visual styles in here directly. You'll note that the colors that you see in here are a little bit uniquely different. This is a color pattern that we're picking up that is a code expression based. So I can define the color ID that is in the palette and provide an expression to Power BI to pick that color. So that way, if I adjust my colors up here, I can adjust these colors all day long. And this will then always use color ID number 3 to pick up our colors. So don't worry about this. You don't have to worry about writing JSON and getting everything together. If you use the tool, it'll automatically spit out a color theme for you automatically and make it super easy for you to use it. And again, if you want to go visit that, that is themes.powerbi.tips in case you want to go check that out. All right, let's zoom back over to our report now. So now that we've made a nice cool theme, we want to adjust this. I think this chart needs to have a title so we can see that the property is changing. Go over here, we'll turn on the title. Let's make it a bit bigger. Change the point size up here to be a bit larger. Okay, so now that we have that done, we'll go over here to the themes. We'll go browse for themes, go back to our desktop, and we'll take our demo theme and bring it in here. And there we go. Theme was successfully imported, and now our chart has been modified and our new color palette has been applied. I think this might be a bar chart. So there we go. So this takes care of modifying an individual theme, and you can use themes from Power BI tips to help you make those. Moving along to our next trick, or tip or trick, whatever you want to call it, is this concept of a layout. Change this back to our area chart. So once we have some visuals on a page, usually it's helpful to put some kind of background image against it or have some control or navigation elements. So this is another tool that we produce. It's called Layouts. You can go get those at layouts.powerbi.tips. So here's another tip or trick here. These are layouts. So there's a lot of free ones on our site. You can just go download them, try them out. But I'm going to walk you through how I'm going to shape some visuals and put them on a layout. But essentially what a layout is it's buttons, navigation elements, and a canvas ready for you to build reports on top of. So what we can do here is, this is an okay looking report, but it may need a little bit more pop to it. I may want to have some navigational elements to help me build some UI, UX design here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all these elements. And if I copy them, Control C, I can move over here to what a layout would look like. So a layout would look like this. It'd be just a file with a background on it, and we might have some buttons in there to help you navigate the pages. So what I can do now is I can Control V, paste all my elements on this page, and now I've got all the visuals on this page. So I can go over here and now I can start adjusting things like we talked about earlier. We want to build some symmetry, so I'm going to get some items up here at the top, make those look nice and sharp together. And then we may want to adjust these other charts here. So maybe I want the maps here maybe to be on the left-hand side. So maybe we want the maps to be on the left. So then we can readjust those on the left here, make them pop a little bit more. Let's get this other chart down here. Hopefully, if it lets me grab it. Come on, little chart. There we go. We'll put the other chart here on this side. Let's try and make them about the same size, like that. And then we can bring this other chart here and maybe make him come over here on this side. So another trick I like to use a lot is, especially when I'm working with visuals, you'll notice here that they're kind of not quite spaced right, and some of the gaps are larger than others. So another tip or trick that I use when I do this is you can actually take a visual and snap it next to something else. And if you use the arrow keys, and I'm just pressing the down arrow here, so down arrow, you'll see I'm moving it very slightly. Let's go in a little bit further here. I'm moving it just by like 1 pixel. So 1 pixel at a time is what I'm moving when I click the down arrows. So what I do a lot of times is I'll take the visual, I'll snap it to something else so it's touching. And then if you hold the shift key and the down arrow, it moves 10 pixels at a time. So now I've got a nice incremental amount of pixels that I can use each time. So 10 pixels seems to be a good border when I'm building things. So for example here, what I may do is I may go here for this visual and say, okay, 10 pixels off of the edge. That means I have 10 pixel spacing here. This visual, I may line up on the edge here as well, but I may want a 10 pixel gap on the top. So what I'll do here is I'll actually align this to the bottom of the page, shift up 10 pixels, and then I'll grab this bottom page here like that, and then I'll shift up one more 10 pixels. We'll bring the top edge back down, and then I'll hit shift down, and now I've got nice easy borders around the edge here. So now I know I have 10 pixels on the left, in the middle, and now again from the bottom. So a lot of times what you can do is you can just use the shift key and the arrow keys to adjust things. Okay, coming back to layouts. In this layout, I actually have multiple buttons here. So this is a predefined configuration. So if I control click on page 2, I can navigate to page 2. So all the layouts that you download from Power BI Tips have multiple pages. Typically, most of them have buttons or triggers on the left-hand side that lets you navigate through the page, and you can click on to additional pages if you need to. So that's really just a kind of a quick tip and trick of how you make reports look just from normal to really accentuate your reports a lot better. So this would be the original with something like this, and now we have this more colorful, in-depth version of our report. And with all themes, you can adjust the theme as this as well. So I can go in here, I can click on a theme, and then it'll automatically adjust some of the colors of the theme for me. So another neat feature there as well. That theme did not like that theme. Okay, so I'm going to move on. We're probably going to enter into now the heavy section. So we've kind of done all the easy tips and tricks. This is really like the advanced part of this. So we're really going to stretch you here on this portion. The idea here is there are certain visuals that you need or you may want to use that just don't handle all of your standard stuff. So I'm going to go to the demo first. We'll show you what that looks like, and then I'll show you how we build it. So here is a visual. And so this is a custom visual that has been built not with any code, but using charts.powerbi.tips, which is a forked version of the Microsoft research project Charticulator. So what you can do here is, this is a custom visual you can build, and every element on here is built by myself. And the idea of this chart came from Nick Snap, who's off of Twitter. What you can do here is, this is a fully interactive report. I can click on different chart elements here on the page, and it will automatically adjust what's happening on the visual. So I can automatically see things here. And this is a really a good gap filling portion of what you need for Power BI. So the visual, if I click on this, you can see right here, I've loaded a custom visual right here, and that's the one that I'm using. So now I'm going to show you how to build this chart and how we get this built. So typically what I do when I'm building custom visuals, I'll start with a blank page or some data. And what I'll do initially is to just add the information to a table. So I'll put a table on the page. I'll make this thing bigger. And then I'll add data points to this that I'm going to use when I make the visual. For example, here, I'm going to want region and state. I'm going to want this information and that information. So I have some numbers and some data. So what this will give me then is, this is the information that I'm going to work with when I'm on the charts program. Now what I can do is I can click the ellipsis up here, and clicking the ellipsis will let me export the data. So clicking export, this will then ask me to save something to my desktop. So I'm going to say sample file, download that. So now I have a file on my desktop. So now I'm going to minimize this, and we're going to open up this sample CSV file. So I'm opening up the sample CSV file, and boom, there we go. There's our nice bit of data. We've got all of it here organized, ready to go for us. So this is our starting point. So from this Excel document, ooh, that was a tongue twister. From this Excel document, we're going to navigate over to a website. Let me pull it up here. It's called charts.powerbi.tips. So charts.powerbi.tips. And I've got a number of YouTube videos on just how to build charts, how to create some simple things in here. Just a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. So you check out charts.powerbi.tips on YouTube, or Google Power BI tips on YouTube. You'll see a bunch of videos. I got a whole series, about 5 or 6 videos about how to use this tool and how to make it work for you. So I'm not going to explain the whole tool. You can go to YouTube for that, but I'm going to just show you how to build this simple chart. Replace the data with a CSV file. Click this button up here. I'm going to go grab my sample data. This is the file that I'm looking to open. I'll click open, and you'll note here all of my data ranges have now changed. They're now something unique over here. So at a high level, I can adjust things on the page here, and the layers element here, these are elements that are on the page. So this is a plot segment, this is a title, and we have attributes of these things. Now for this particular visual, I really don't want to have a bunch of information here, so I'm going to start pretty much from a clean slate. I'm going to erase the plot segment, I'm going to erase the title, and I'll adjust this line here, and we can adjust the numbers here down below by just typing in number values. So 50, 50, 50, 50. That will define the perimeter of my chart. Now I may want to buffer the edge or make a standoff from these guidelines. One of the only things you can guarantee that will be held in Power BI after you export this will be these guides. These guides define where your visual will live, and it does not extend the bounds of what the custom visual will be in Power BI Desktop. So if you want to adjust these, you can. So like 30, 30, 30 for the top, width, and the bottom. You can adjust those there, and then it will shrink those elements here on the perimeter. Next, we'll grab a mark, and we'll add a mark to the top of the page, like this. We'll grab another mark, and put it at the bottom of the page. We'll grab another mark, put it in the middle, and one more mark here on the other side. Now we're not going to use these in the final visual. These are just to define regions for me to graph against. So this top one here, we're going to adjust the height of this one to 30. Adjust the bottom one to a height of 30. We're going to adjust the middle ones to a height of width of 60. And you'll see later as we build elements on top of this what this is doing. So this will be a width of 60 as well. Next, we're going to start adding some plot segments. So first thing we got to do is make sure we have a glyph that's empty here, which we do. Then we can add our line plot segment. We'll go from the bottom of the chart up to the top here. And these little green dots on the edges here let me know that I'm attached to some data point. There's something that's binding that data to an element. If I don't attach it, if I have it out here in no man's land, it'll just be white. And so there's no bearing or there's no reference point for where that thing will live. And therefore you'll get very bad results when you export to Power BI Desktop. So you got to make sure all your endpoints are green that defines your locations. Next, we'll build the mark. We'll add the mark here on the page. And then I'm going to change the glyph height to a height of 7. So I'm going to make individual marks. And in this program, every single mark that you put on a plot segment represents one single data point in your data set. So I have, maybe like 40 different data points here. Well, all these data points are because I have about 40 different data points in my exported file. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this information from drug information, put that on the axis, and that will now then put a plot axis here and then rearrange all my data bars to align to the numerical value of that item as a data point. We're going to change the width of this thing here. Let's make it shorter. And now we're going to change the color. So we click the fill in the attributes, click on something dark blue. And because the axis is now harder to read, let's flip that around. So we're going to click on the plot segment, and then we're going to make the position the opposite. And we also want to go from 0, so I'm going to enter 0 as a manual number. The next thing we'll do is we'll go back to our shape and we'll change the opacity to 0.5 because we want it to be transparent. A transparent shape here, and this is something you just can't do, this very easily in Power BI Desktop, is a bunch of transparent colors as fields. It just doesn't, there's no property for it. You can't turn it on or turn it off or change the transparency. This program gives you full control to adjust any kind of visual things here. And the reason we're using transparency is now this shows density. I can see density of these points here at this area, and I can see the sparsity of these data points up here. All right, so this is our first portion of the graph. Our next portion will need to be in the middle of the graph. So now we're going to add a new glyph. We're going to add another plot segment here, and we're going to go from the top to the bottom this time because we're going to use the words. So we're going to go by state. I'm going to add the state to the axis here. I'm going to flip the position here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm also going to add a mark on these things. Again, we will change the mark glyph height to be 7 again. And now this time, we're going to adjust the end here, and we're going to make the height of the mark match some data now. So since we were working with the drug information earlier, we're going to make the drugs the height of the bar. We're going to change the bar to a color of dark blue again. So this matches our color that we had before previously. And now we've got some information that's kind of making a bit more sense. Now we don't really need this axis here to be here. So let's turn it off because we're not going to use it. So I'm going to turn the visibility off. We'll yet add another axis here. This will be another plot segment. So we're going to start from the top and go down to the bottom. This time I'll add a text box, and I'm going to realign the text box here. So if I zoom out a little bit, you'll see that this text box is not in the center of this grid. So we're not centered here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually grab the text box and align it to the very middle. And then I'm going to grab the state and drop it here as the state names. Now you can see they're all out of order, which is not good. So in order to fix that, we have to grab the state and drop it to this axis. And then we turn off the axis for this plot segment so it's not visible. And now we have all our nice state names. So we can go back to our text item and we can make our text a bit smaller here so it fits. That looks about right. And then our last step here is we need to make those squiggly lines that go between these. So the idea here is each of these states has a single data point. That data point represents a bar height, but that can also be represented as a number line as well. So to add some artistic flair, we're going to add some links to this. We're going to say plot segment 1 and 2, and we're going to make a band. When I create the links, the bands will be created between the two visual elements, change it to Bezier, and then we're going to change the curviness up here a little bit so it kind of looks more like it's curving together. So we've already made half the chart. Now I'm not going to go through the whole thing and make the full chart. The only thing I'm going to clean up here is I'm going to turn off a couple visuals like that. And now we have this nice Sankey-like chart. So I have the bars mapped here by the middle, and then I have the distribution of those bars matched with the curvy lines over to the value on the line chart. So to export this information, you click the export button here on the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Clicking export, you click the Power BI desktop visual, scroll down, and you can enter some information here. I would say the visual name should always be no spaces. You will have errors if you import it to desktop with spaces there, so you want to make sure that there's no spaces for that. And then you can just export it. So exporting this visual will download a custom visual to your desktop. And then what we can do is go back over to Power BI. We can then click the ellipsis inside Power BI Desktop here. We can import from File, my new custom visual. We'll open that up. It'll add it here to the page, and then I can click on it. And then it should, there's my little visual. Now my number values are messed up here a bit, so I need to adjust this. So I see I have these informations in the wrong areas here. So we need to add the state down here to this area. And there we go. So now I have my chart as it was displayed in the other graph. And I should be able to click on the different elements and it automatically scales things and shows me that the data is then being built here. So that's, we'd have to finish the other half of it. So it's the same, repeat the same actions, but just on the opposite side. And then that would give you this full Sankey chart as well. So that's about it for tutorial pieces. I think we're right at time here, right around 46 minutes in. Are there any questions or things we should review and go over? Actually, you know what? I got to do this. Let me go back here to the presentation.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions on it.
Oh, I'm sure we do. Okay, that's good though. All right,
Yeah.
so let me go back here to this. Let's present this slide. Present from current slide. Okay, so this is the one I think they need us to do at the end.
Yes.
Hopefully, if I can get there. All right, escape slideshow. Present from the current slide. That's what I want. There we go. Now we're on the questions portion. So throw me some questions.
Yeah, we have how could you show us how to create the buttons like why simple and consistent? This is one question which we got.
Okay. That was the earlier question. So let's go back to that one. So I'm actually gonna leave the questions button there, the end bumper. So we're gonna go back into the report here. So let me go back over to the report now. So I'm going to show you how to make these buttons. So what these buttons are doing, the why, simple, consistent, and how, these are all made off of bookmarks. So if I control click them when I'm in the desktop, you can see I've made, so these are new elements here that they, I'll get rid of those, delete. Okay. So if I click on why, this basically shows a bookmark. So what's happening behind the scenes, if I click on the view ribbon and then click on the bookmarks section here in the middle, clicking on bookmarks will then expose what's going on here. So what we've done is in these bookmarks, they're set up to display visuals or not display them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to a blank page. I'm going to make a button or two and just show you how I'm going to trigger bookmarks using a button. So I'm going to go to a blank page. I'm going to click, this is just an image here on the page. So I'm going to grab this image, copy this image, and I'm going to put it on this page. And I'm going to make it a bit smaller here. And then I'm going to grab something else just arbitrarily. I'm going to grab this chart. I'm going to copy this, and I'll put the chart on the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a button that will turn one of them on or off, or hide something, or do something along those lines. So if I want, I'm going to go here to the home ribbon. No, just kidding. Go to the insert ribbon, click on buttons, and I'm just going to click a blank button, the one here at the very bottom. So we're going here to buttons, and then we're going to blank. Adding that on the page. There's my button. I can then enter in some button text here. So this can be show, oops, I clicked the caps button, show circles. And then what I can do is I can then go to the format, the selection window, which is found to turn that on. You go to the view ribbon, you go to the one called selection. So that's where we're going to here. It's under view, and then it's the section called selection pane. So this is the panel or pane that you can use for this. So now what I can do is I can see the different elements on the page, and I can turn them off. So let's just, for kicks and giggles here, let's turn everything off. And if I wanted to show just the circles, I would want to turn on the image. Now, a technique I like to use here is when I'm using buttons or I'm using bookmarks, I typically will show, grab the things I need to show and select them only. But in this case, I'm going to leave everything on the whole page. So I'm just going to unselect everything, snap a bookmark by clicking add, and then I'm going to name it. So always name your bookmarks because you will get lost. So this will be show circles. And then you can adjust different properties here. Since I'm just hiding and showing stuff, I'm going to turn off the ability to trigger data. So I won't change any data. I will leave the display on because I want to show or hide this particular visual, but I will turn off the current page. So I don't want the current page to show. I just want the display this item. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, now I'll go over here to the bookmarks area. So let me click the button. When I click on the button, there'll be an item called action. I'll turn that on, open up action, click the drop-down list to bookmark, and then from the bookmark, I'll just say show circles. Now, if I want another button to show the other thing, I would then build another button on the page. So let's go insert, another button that is blank. And here, we're going to enter the button text of this one. This will be show chart. Okay, now that we're showing chart on this button, again, we will have to make a new bookmark for the new items. So now what I'll do is I will turn off or turn on the chart, and I will turn off the image. So now I've adjusted this. So now what I'll do here is I'll snap another bookmark. This bookmark will now show chart. Again, I can adjust those properties, turn off data, turn off current page, and then for the button, clicking the button, click on action, change it to bookmark, change it to show chart. So now if I control click the show circles, it'll take one thing away and show the other. And now if I click show chart, it'll show the other thing. So this is the basic technique that I'm using for all those buttons in the beginning portion, where I'm actually clicking on the buttons and they're changing for me. All right, next question.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mike. And the next question would be like, is there a way to format all the fields of a table or a matrix without having to go to each specific field? This was from Mark.
All the fields. So you can format them all. So there's a couple of things you can do for formatting a matrix. Now, what you're probably asking for is very specific features. That's where you would go to themes.powerbi.tips, and you would theme the entire property set all at once. So you could change a bunch of properties. There is some generic features that you can filter or change inside a table. So if I go to a table here, we'll just add some information onto a table. There are some general properties you can adjust here that I use more often than not, is these styles. So there's a style section here. If you click one of these styles, it'll automatically adjust a lot of the properties below and have them all fixed for you. So these are just different options you can do here. But if I'm really going to go very stylized on the tables or matrices, I'll pretty much go out to the themes.powerbi tips and I'll just build out the theme that I want and make sure that it just works, and then come in here, test it, and make sure I have the properties the way I want. Next question.
All right, and next question would be like, how can we do a version control of a PBI report?
Great question. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. Two methods that I think are probably the most relevant. Version control works really well in SharePoint, and you can store the entire file. So when I'm building reports, I'm typically building reports in a workspace that has an attached SharePoint location. In version 1 of SharePoint, or in version 1 of workspaces, you can just automatically get that by default. You start a workspace in version 1, a group will show up and you'll have an associated SharePoint. Store all your Power BI files there, and then you automatically get version control. You can actually publish directly from SharePoint and actually have a blog about this. Let's see here, Power BI tips. I think this is called publish SharePoint. Let's just try SharePoint. So I have a couple blogs about this. Whoops, helps if I spell SharePoint right. Let me pull it here. There we go. So you can actually go to updating a SharePoint file directly from, so Seth had a great article about some do's and don'ts of doing that. You actually have uploading Excel files from SharePoint, and then here is best practices for sharing. So this is the one you're going to want to review from Power BI Tips. This is where we talk about this concept of having a get data element, and I think it's about halfway down the article here. Yeah, here's where we talk about how you can get the files added here. And when you have the files, you can go to the files section, upload your data, the report will show up, and then you can use the get data activity, get files, and then you can go to OneDrive. And when you do that, you can directly load your report. So when you do publishing this way, it's definitely a bit different. It's not as easy as pressing the button in the desktop. But what you get, though, is you get a team that can work on files together through SharePoint. Those files are not stored locally on my machine. They're now in the cloud, which is great. And then SharePoint will automatically synchronize any changes of that file with PowerBI.com within about an hour. I've seen usually around 10 to 20 minutes for refreshing times. But in general, PowerBI.com will go back to that file and refresh it. So this will be the article for you. Best practices for sharing. Next question.
All right, so if you select some colors for specific values, like you did within the regions, can you use the format painter to have the same colors on a new visual with similar values? This was from John.
Can you read that one more time? I'm not sure I quite followed all of that. So if you had colors on a visual and you wanted to reuse those colors somewhere else, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, he was just referring to the colors which you use for the region, right? Specific colors, what you did for the regions. Can we use the same format painter to have the same colors on a new visual with similar values?
Okay, so here's how I handle colors in my report. I never, I'll say that. I'm pretty sure I almost never adjust the colors individually. So if I'm ever adjusting colors of a report, I almost always build a theme. So if I want to change the whole theme or the look of or feel of a report, I'll very rarely go in here and modify them one by one. So by default, when I have the same property, so I think what maybe this is what you're asking. Let me interpret here a little bit. Let's just say I have two charts. I have one chart here for region, and let's add some data to it, some dollars or some numbers here. So I have numbers by region. Let's make this a chart like this, okay? This is by default how the chart is looking. When I add region back to the legend, this is when they call it like a rainbow chart, right? Because it's a bunch of bars that are individually colored. In this case, I would not need the legend, so I would turn that off, and I'll just have the bars like this. So this is the beginning of my coloring aspects. Now, let's say I want to have a different dimension, but I still want the same colors, and I think that's maybe what you're asking. So I'm going to build a different chart now. So let's build a different chart, this bar, and now this time I'll do state as my axis. And this time I'll use traffic, a different value here. Now, initially these colors won't match. However, Power BI is intelligent enough to know that the region on the left-hand chart, this chart over here, the color here, is the color of region. So it's already defined a palette color, or it's using the color palette from region. So then on this chart, then I would want to grab region and add it as my legend. So what this will do is this will automatically coordinate the colors between the two different regions for me automatically in my chart. So the legends will be identical. So if I go back to my original chart and turn the legend back on, you can see all the colors are the same for each named region. By default, that's how the data model works. I don't like having legends on. I think they're a waste of space. So I try and get rid of them as much as possible. So this is how I would use it. And then if I want to change all the colors all at one time, I would then go to the view ribbon, click the ellipsis, or click the down arrow, and then I would start picking colors down here. So this is where I would pick other colors to adjust my entire theme. I think that's going to get the question.
Yeah. All right. So another question, like, can you rearrange the shape by orientation landscape?
Oh, of the canvas of the report?
Yeah, I guess.
So right now everything is in a landscape mode. You can adjust the entire page of the report by changing the page information. So clicking the paintbrush, clicking page information, and then you can click on page size. So you have, by default, you have these different sizes. You have 16 by 9, 4 by 3, and letter. Letter is more of your long page letter reporting. By far, the most common used is 16 by 9. Most monitors are widescreen, so I almost always build all my reports in 16 by 9 unless I have a very specific request. I typically do not build anything else other than 16 by 9. You can also do a custom size if you want. So if you don't like this width, if you want to go something bigger or something longer, so you can do 1440, which changes your aspect ratio, but you can go twice as long now, so you can adjust your page size however you need here. I would be very cautious with this. When you do this, this definitely means your users now need to interact with your report differently. So in some cases, how they render the report on the service side, you can actually, I'm viewing this page in the entirety of the page, but you can also do fit to width. And this actually causes your page to scroll, which sometimes I find is a weird user interaction, because if you're scrolling here in a visual, I can scroll the visual, but then I have to move my cursor out and scroll the page. So sometimes I find this is a little bit tricky for users. They don't quite understand the difference between a page scroll and a visual scroll. So I typically don't extend my pages beyond the edge of the screen. Next question.
All right. So Jordan wants to know which version of Power BI you're using now.
The latest. I'm on December 2019. That's the only one that's been released.
All right, that answers the question. And again, Jeff wants to know, like, can you recommend any resources like books or podcasts that specifically cover things like dashboard design?
Alberto Cairo. Let's see if I can get his website up here. Alberto Cairo. He's amazing. Yeah, this gentleman. So this guy is Alberto is a professor. He is absolutely incredible. Anything he writes is gold. So the functional art, how charts lie, really good stuff. Highly recommend it. So this guy is amazing. Follow him on Twitter. He's super awesome. So I take a lot of guidance from him, and he's really a good expert. So he studies this stuff for a full-time job. He has a lot of funny articles. He'll pull stuff out of like the news and have comments or commentary around what he finds in the news and how misleading sometimes those charts are. So he's a really good guy to think about for following.
All right. So for any question and answer visuals, like, is it possible to present default top questions that customer can choose from?
Yes. So you can go into, see if I can put a Q&A on here on this page here. So let's insert and ask a question. So I have questions here. And so this is, by default, it's trying to get me started on some information. So it's looking at my data model and trying to make suggestions here. And as I grow this box, it's automatically trying to make me some more information here. If I click on one of these, it'll automatically suggest these things for me, and it'll just give me some data inside this, this visual. What you can also do here is you can click the little gear. So let me just go back here, delete that. You can click the gear in the question and answer, this little thing here. Clicking the gear will take you to a whole experience around authoring questions. So here's how you can review questions, here's how you can teach Q&A things and manage your terms. There's a lot of help here as well that you would want to read up on, but you can review questions people have asked of your data set here. You can teach Q&A. This would be traffic by state in a bar. See if it'll, yeah, there we go. So traffic by state in a bar chart, it'll actually show you that chart, and you can start teaching things here. So these elements here mean it's already been trained. If you start typing in questions and it doesn't understand them, you can actually adjust the syntax here and help it learn things. You can also manage terms here as well. So a lot of this stuff is in preview. Stay tuned, but your real big documentation thing you need to know here is all this getting started information. This is where you want to start. It'll help you understand, fix questions, and help people use their models to the best of their ability. In ancillary, if you really want to get into it, I also have a tool that I've made, Power BI Tips /lingo. So behind every single question and answer, there's actually an entire tool that helps you build different language elements that you would see here. So if you go to Power BI Tips Tools /lingo, you can actually import your entire JSON model here directly into this report. So this is you can upload it and modify things. You can change or add properties here. So you can add properties, adjust the linguistic schema. I think let's see here, where's linguistic schema? Modeling. You can export the linguistic schema here from the desktop. So I can say, export this thing, save it to my desktop. And then you can upload that file right here. And then it will automatically preload all the data in that schema for you. So you can go through here and you can actually add different bindings, different terms. I would say that this is very much getting in the weed. This is very, very detailed. You're really, really, really refining and combing the linguistic schema. So many people probably wouldn't really want to use this. Instead, they would probably want to use the standard tools that Microsoft is developing around the linguistics things.
Okay.
Great.
And yep. And Victor want to know, like, is that possible for one visual to affect all other visuals at the same time?
That is the default behavior. So by default, clicking on any one item in a visual automatically affects everything else in the visuals that have properties that belong to that. Next question.
Yeah, and Leon want to know, like, when you save files before September 2019, does that mean start from scratch, or can we save the existing file?
I've tried that. You can't save the existing file. You have to start from scratch.
Okay. So Lauren want to know, like, can you able to send the links to the themes generator and the tool that gets the hex value from an image?
Yes. Deepak and I will coordinate afterwards. We'll try to put all the links of the tools and things that I'm using and I talked about in this session. We'll try and put all those links and things in the description of the YouTube post. Is that something we can do?
Yes, we can certainly do that. And same, Lauren, another question, like, can you add custom colors in addition to a theme similar to what you can do with PPT and Excel?
So all your custom coloring and theme options are inside the view ribbon. So you can modify things here. You can't make any more colors than what is already provided to you. But if you go to my custom theme generator, themes.powerbi.tips, you can add hundreds of colors if you really need them.
All right. So, and what is the name of the software or a program that allows you to generate a theme from a picture?
That's good, great. It's actually a plugin that I use for Google. And I'll throw it up here. It's from the Google Chrome store. The extension is called Palette Creator. That's what I'm using. And I will put a link to this in the description of the video links. Next question.
Yeah, and do we have a limit to export the data from a visual, like row limits?
Yes, there's limits in there. I don't 100% know all of them off the top of my head. I know for CSV files, I think it's a little bit larger than an Excel file export. So when you're exporting data, I think it's around, I know a visual only gets 30,000 data points. I want to say that a export of a CSV file gets like 100 or 150,000 data points max. And anything beyond that, you won't get any more data than that. I would not recommend exporting data at 150,000 rows of data from Power BI anyways. If you really do need that level of detail of export or details, you're probably looking at paginated reports, and that's a much better solution for getting tons of data out of a reporting solution. Power BI is more around the visual interactive space. It's not, its strength is good at, you can do some exports, but you really want to look at paginated reports for that solution.
All right, and can you sort that chart ASC or December by right axis?
Say that again?
I said, can we able to sort the chart ascending or descending by right axis?
No. So that is more of a visual property. The ellipsis on here, you can sort ascending or descending inside the visual, but that's a property that you have to set manually. There's not a really good way of sorting it dynamically. You might be able to play a little bit of trickery with using ranking inside your data files, but that would get really tricky really fast, and I would not recommend it. So now I would say you probably could if you work really hard at it, but I'm going to say for most normal users, it's not, you can't do that.
Okay. All right. And one more question, like how cool would it be if PBA let us natively set transparency on color elements or turn the color of a series off completely?
Oh, that would be a great idea. That would be pretty cool. I know you can do some other cool interest. So what you have seen now here recently is there are a bunch of functions. So the properties have been getting opened up a lot more recently, where you are able to produce functions that do define what color is. So that is something that you can do to help you enhance some of that aspect and do some more custom coloring based on equations, more so than actually working on, using the theme files.
Okay, and for the chart making tool, does it has the capability of doing advanced interactions like dragging the mouse to create box that select data points or select access value in the box?
No, it does not. So the charts tool or charticulator will pretty much build a visual. You can interact with the data, or you can click on visual elements, and I guess I could show you that too. On the chart that I have here, you should be able to interact with the charts here. So I could click Hawaii and Idaho, and I could see the values show up. So the chart is interactive, but it's not dynamic. You can't go grab visual elements across there like you would in like Plotly or in R. Stay tuned. I'm actually working, I've had a project where I worked in Plotly and have done a custom visual using that. So there will be another tutorial coming here near future around building custom R visuals using Plotly. That builds and grab. Any other questions?
All right, so what is the use of current page off?
What is the use of
current page off?
Oh, current page off.
Yep.
Must be my bookmarks. Oh, got it. I know what you're talking about. Okay, current page off. Okay, so let's go to my example here. I had some bookmarks, and if I click this button, it would navigate me somewhere where that bookmark is. So if I turn off current page, it does not navigate me between pages of the report. So if I click on current page, and I'm actually going to move my button here, right? So I'm going to copy this and move it to page 5. So I'm going to drop my button here. If I click this button now, it should, oh, show circles. Let's turn this to the right one on here. Current page. If I click on show circles, it will then navigate me to the page where the bookmark was made. So that one option that's called current page is a navigation element. It lets you navigate between different pages.
Okay, and is there a way to set the width of columns in the matrix or table native visuals to XPX, or is the only doable by dragging columns border?
As of right now, I'm only aware of doing it by dragging the borders. So you can't actually specify a specific range.
Okay, and what is the best way to copy those charts in other Office documents, whatever charts got displayed?
Ooh, into other documents, screenshots. So I typically don't embed Power BI things in other reports. If I'm doing them, I'm taking static screenshots and I'm just copying and pasting. The preferred method to consume Power BI reports is from powerbi.com, the portal. So that's really gives you your best experience. and that's the most dynamic that you're going to get.
All right, and one last question, like, do we have the same version as you, but don't see the themes options? Like, how do you trigger those options to show up?
So if your Power BI desktop, if you have December and it doesn't look like this, you do have to turn this on. So it's under Options and Settings. You go into Options. Maybe, come on, there it is. This is a preview feature. And then what I'm using here is customizing the current theme is set to on. So that's this one here. And I'm also using the updated ribbon. So these are the two features that I'm using in this demo, and that might be why mine looks different than yours. And customizing current theme is also needs to be turned on for you to be able to use that feature. Typically things go preview for 2 or 3 months, maybe 4 months, and then it goes general availability later on. But be aware, this is in preview, so Microsoft reserves the right to be able to pull those features and not use them or take them to general availability if they want.
All right. So one last question. Like, I guess this would be the last question. So when
this is the last question.
Yeah. We have a bunch of questions today. Like, I was surprised to do this. All right. So this one from Ari. When I change the theme of my report, has happened to me many times, that PBA breaks and won't let me access to it. I've been seen in PBA community that this is a common error. Have you bumped into that? How did you solve it?
I personally have not solved that. I have corrupted a Power BI file 1 or 2 in my day. So sometimes a Power BI file will get corrupted. Typically when I'm resolving that, I will save it as a new file. And if that still doesn't solve the problem, what I will do is, so one method that I use a lot is I usually have the data model separately from my report. So if I really need to, I'll just copy the visuals over to another page or another report that has the same data model to attach to it. So there's a couple ways you can kind of get around that. I'm finding more recently that copying visuals between reports has been very helpful for me there as well. So you might have to rebuild some things there as well. I might recommend if your file is crashing and it's just not having a good day and just does not like you, try, save a copy of your report and start deleting visual elements one by one and trying to apply the theme and see if it keeps crashing. Likely there might be some issue with one of the visual elements on your page that's causing the headache that it's not liking. So potentially that could be a problem as well. I'd also recommend using a tool that generates a theme as opposed to writing your own theme. Sometimes if you're generating your own themes, you can miss some code and it won't load properly and it says error, can't load file. So I'd recommend using a tool that helps you build those themes so that way it loads properly every time.
All right, so we are done with the questions and
great.
Yeah.
Sorry for running over. I thank you all for attending. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for a fabulous webinar, Mike. It's been
thank you. Appreciate it.
Really good. Yeah. All right. So do you want to say anything else on this, Mike?
No, I think we're good. Is there anything else you need from me?
No, we are good to go on this.
Thank you so
much. Yeah, we are still live.
Want to cut it?
Yeah, I'm going to cut it off now. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day.